Welcome everyone to the last session in the OFF program, and it's my great pleasure to ask Jan van Esch to come up to the stage and tell us more about Mitumba, invasive species number 2.
Mtumba umefika, mtumba umefika, mtumba umefika. Nani ameomba nimpe, nani ameomba nimpe, nani ameomba nimpe. Tuna nguvu, tuna nguvu, tuna nguvu, tuna nguvu. Tuna nguvu ya kucheza, mna nguvu ya kucheza, mna nguvu ya kucheza. Ndio tucheze, ndio tucheze, ndio tucheze, ndio tucheze. Mtumba umefika, mtumba umefika baba. Zaleo, mtumba umefika huo. Tuna nguvu, mna nguvu ya kucheza.
Thank you very much, Gunther and Benoit, for inviting me. That was me wearing 2 bags of Mitumba. Mitumba is a bag of a bundle of clothes from Tanzania, and that were 450 clothes that came from Europe. I'm going to talk a little bit why you saw me wearing all these clothes, and then try to relate it to the subject what this conference is about. So I'm a Dutch artist with a background in social and health sciences. I worked for a very long time in development aid. I worked for Doctors Without Borders in Russia, and then I worked for several NGOs in Nigeria and Tanzania. And I had big problems with the idea that the giving from the West was taken. So my work as an artist about since 2010, when I stopped doing the international development work, is all about the gift. I don't know if you speak German. In German, gifts means poison, and in English, it means gift as a present. In Dutch, there's some people Dutch, we have gif, vergif, vergeven, and it all comes from the same word gab, which is the old Indo-European word, which means giving in most Germanic languages, but in Irish it means take. So there was always a connection between giving and taking. There was always a connection, giving and taking is part of one thing. A lot of Western donors, I think, try to change that and see as a very one-directional thing. A gift, in my opinion, and I'm quoting now Bourdieu, is a form of communication and is defined by a counter-gift. When you travel, I don't know, I lived in Nigeria, I lived in Tanzania for 8 years. If you travel to these countries, then you see all these cars coming by where they say USAID, from the American people. I just took a train trip that I can recommend everyone from Zambia to Tanzania, Tazara, and you go in the train and it says China Aid. This idea of working with the gift and the idea how it works is something that I normally do with groups. Now I'm doing also my own solo work. Last year I was part of Documenta 15 of a collective ZKU from Germany, and we rebuilt our roof into a boat, and we tried to sail, I'd never know how to say that in English, to go by boat from Berlin to Kassel with human power and solar power. So we had bicycles in the front, and we tried to sail, and the whole project on the boat was created by me and was based on the idea that everything was an exchange. So with all the local communities, food, clothes, care, culture, and energy. It was quite of a wild project. I was, in the end, 50 days on the boat, 24 hours, but we didn't make it because there was not enough water in the Weser. So about 200 kilometers from Kassel, we stranded, and actually the boat is still there, but it was also very much a sign, I think we talk about it, what happens when the rainfall goes down. Now, Mitumba means bundle. In Swahili, in the 80s, the first time when Western clothes were sent to Tanzania, they were called Nguo ya Wazungu Waliokufa. That means dead white men's clothes. The idea, people said, and I again, because I was just there, the idea that people would throw away perfectly fine clothes could only be in their mind with the idea that is because someone died and you don't want to have them anymore. And I created, I think some of you seen me, I call my alter ego Mitumba. And I did an exhibition in Tanzania where the curator Valerie Amani said, Mitumba talks about the cosmic disconnect between the donation boxes in Germany and Italy, and finally, what I will show you, the markets in Ilala Karume in Dar es Salaam. My computer got stolen, so I had to fix some last-minute photographs. But when you're at the Red Cross, it says, Ihre Spende hilft uns Hilfe. Your gifts, your donations helps us helping. And this is a very, I think, controversial one from Humana, which is not even an NGO, where it says you donate your clothes, and then they go and are sold, and the results of this goes to Africa. Funny enough, they do not say that 1% of these clothes actually is recycled in Europe. About 5 of them are worn again in the world. 10 become part of some kind of reuse, as in isolation, and 85% ends up in a dump. Then, when you come to Africa, this whole idea, and I think that's what my point is about, the West has a way of using their garbage as a gift. The way we frame it, helping. A gift without a receiver, in my opinion, is a garbage bin, and a gift without someone being able to give something back is power play. So this year I was traveling from South Africa to Tanzania. I was on a residency in South Africa, and I went by bus and train to Dar es Salaam. And I thought it was a funny story. I was in Lilongwe in Malawi, and I went to this store, and it was called H&M, and I never seen it. So these are the bundles. In one of these bundles are about 250 pieces of clothes. They have different grades. And I asked them, because I did never seen them before, is it really H&M? And he said, no, it's a Pakistani company, and the owner is called Hassan Mohammed. From these markets, they go into, this is in Dar es Salaam, they go to Ilala Karume, is enormous. It has hundreds and hundreds of these stalls where people separate these clothes already in different kind of grades. And they're already selected in Europe. We all think that second-hand clothes in Europe shop actually are coming from Europe, but they're normally shipped to other North Africa, in Tunisia. They are selected. Some parts go back to European second-hand shops. The rest goes, among other places, to Tanzania. That is a shop that sells cotton, male, non-white, long-sleeve shirts. And you have similar shops where they have short sleeves, that's white, etc. This is then a little bit further up in Dar es Salaam, so they grade them in 3 different layers. That goes to the local community, and this is when you find on the way when you're on the bus in small villages. I've been doing that because I lived there for 8 years. I used to run an art center, and I did a big project with dancers about Mitumba. And one of the things, initially I was just sort of the curator, the outsider, and then I thought I have to also be visible, because I asked my fellow artist what Mitumba for them meant, and they said it comes from white people and it comes over sea. So I did this whole starting idea of performances on the beach coming out of the sea with 450 clothes. And since then, I'm actually not only working what comes from there, especially with COVID. In 2022, I only wore clothes that I found on the streets in Berlin and Amsterdam, and this one is one of them. This white shirt actually comes from the Mitumba bags. And for me, it's very funny. They write, take the clothes with, and in German they write, zum Verschenken. And I call the program zum Vergeben, because I think if donating that and pretending that it is a gift is actually probably more to forgive yourself than to actually give it away. I do something, I do like drawing, I draw. So for every piece, and there's hundreds and hundreds right now, I make, and you've seen them, either a small drawing or I make life-size copies of the clothes I find, and that's my way of, I call it a rite of passage. I take them back, they're garbage, and I try to bring them back in the world of the wearables. And then, and you all have seen that, I try different ways to actually bring the clothes back. One of my points is what when people upcycle things, I thought, but the funny thing is most of these clothes are perfectly fine. So I make a point by not doing and changing anything of the clothes that I found. Here I came back with a whole bag of clothes from Tanzania, and I found Alexander McQueen, Vivienne Westwood, Yves Saint Laurent, Valentino. So I had these really high-end shirts. And with a dancer from the Netherlands, we during an art performance in Berlin, wore all these clothes and tried to give them away as a gift. No one took them. People were scared. Finally, and I still don't know how to think about it, it was a homeless guy who took the Alexander McQueen. Then I had a similar exhibition in Sweden, in Skellefteå, in a museum. And there I brought the cheapest of the cheapest stuff there is. I picked up things from Berlin and Amsterdam from the street. I hang them in the museum, and again I asked people to take them, and they were all gone in 2 weeks. So I also want to make this point about value is very much not what we look at, what we see, but what we attribute to it. This was just in, I had a residency in Stellenbosch in South Africa. This was the exhibition, so I make these large drawings of clothes I found on the street, and the curator, Mike Mavura, a Zimbabwean curator, wanted me and made this old gallery, which was an old church, into a sort of high-end boutique. And these clothes are some of the clothes that some of you are wearing right now, because I asked the people in Stellenbosch and in Tanzania to donate clothes to Europeans. So I wanted to try to turn this cycle around. And then with my mitumba that you probably saw when I was the guy coming on your, crashing your party, I asked the students of the university to wear the whole wardrobe, so I do kind of performances with larger groups. And now I come back why I'm here. So I met Gunther in McGill, and I was doing a performance there at the Sustainable Fashion Show. I think sustainable and fashion are very hard to combine. But I was with 7 people also, including a professor, some PhD students who also wore their whole wardrobe. And after the Sustainable Fashion Show, we did our catwalk, and we finally, very slowly undressed and showed how much clothes the average person has. But when I talked to Gunther, he said, but probably I didn't know it that much. But if you go to, and I only know East Africa and South Africa, you see a pretty similar thing happening with IT leftovers. And if I understand, Ren is has a very big communication telecom industry. So during this trip, one of my first stops was in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And these, when did we stop using these kind of, how do you call it? Keyboards. How many years ago? Never? Are people still using them? And how many people are not using them anymore? Because this is actually in a art gallery of Moffat. I have to look up his surname, Takurdiwa. Who's a pretty successful artist right now, and who makes big sculpture out of art. And that's also one of the things that I think is interesting, that a lot of artists in residence that used to come to my art center all talked about recycling, but I don't think that the recycling is a problem of solving the amount of waste that comes to the African continent. Although I really do, and I'm sorry this is not the best quality photos, this is a group from Kinshasa, Congo, and they do these street performances where they make huge costumes out of European waste. This is what I'm wearing today, so I think you should not upcycle, you should just wear till you can't wear them anymore. But this time I went with one of my a young artist from Tanzania, Lazaro, and we picked up, which I thought this is the last of the last. I don't think things have much more life after here. This was on Cocoa Beach, and in the last day we very quickly made my new outfit out of here. And Lazaro is someone, he was an old street kid that became an artist, very often lacking material. And we talked about, we started together this project that he starts to rescue leftover pieces of fabric and make things out of it. Then when you go over the streets, I don't know if any of you ever been in East Africa, it's full of old second-hand material that comes from Europe. But to me the most surprising, there used to be an outside market in Dar es Salaam, Gerezani. They took people off the street, and they have this new building where all the computer repair people were. And there is where the story came similar to the Mitumba story. Almost all of these computers, when you look at the back, say it's in Germany or they were sold in the US. So all these computers come from Europe and are shipped to East Africa. I asked some people, I heard that it's illegal to import or export waste. So what you do not see, as you see with the clothes, is where the main market is. But they told me, they said the majority of these things they were able to repair in no time, and they sell them over there. And then they take them apart, and especially the chips is where the Chinese come and pick them up again. Then these are the last leftovers, so you have a real chain in these things where you can buy workable computers, you can buy spare parts, they combine them. And then you go not much further on the street, and it's still downtown Dar es Salaam, and people are taking the copper out of it and taking everything apart. And then you come, and I thought this image was interesting. They are building with international development aid this new electronic train rail. And under the whole rail is the leftover of all the computers that were dumped as gifts. This image especially sort of combined both of the stories. It's electronic waste, car waste, and Mitumba. And this is what I think the end part of where the waste is going. And then people unfortunately burn it. When I did this, we did an exhibition in the exhibition in Tanzania a couple of years ago. Valerie Amani was my curator, and I really liked her thing. She said the problem of giving in Europe is that people are detached and otherwise unbothered where all this going is going. And I think my point from this at this conference, and thank you for inviting me, was actually to give a little bit of a light where it goes, and hope that can start some questions about what can be done about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and Jan van Esch, it was fantastic. We have time for one or two questions. Anyone in the audience? We have the students standing by. Rosa.
Thanks, Jan. It's all fantastic. I have learned a lot from these 2 days of you being with us. I was wondering about what you said about retrieving copper on the streets. Why on the streets, and why doesn't it actually, because it's quite precious material, right? So why is it not done more systematically?
So these images, this is done pretty systematically. It's organized, and it's Tanzania is quite of an over-organized country. So to stay in this place, you have to pay. And this man, they also do it in these places. But then they throw things away, and this guy on the street, and it used to be a huge area, also collect bottles, they collect PVC, tubes, etc. It's been the place where recycling is happening. And strangely enough, it is big, people come and buy them in big quantity. I don't know why it's not better organized, but it's been always the place wherever I'm brought, so maybe it's also where people think I can find it.
Okay, and we have time for one more question. Yes.
Jan, what do people think about the dumping? Is there do they conceive it as a bad act from the part of the Europeans and other nations, or are they grateful?
It's an interesting one. It's very double. I mean, I cannot talk on behalf of the Tanzanians. The people who sell the mitumba, it's a big business. The people who make clothes, they say it's terrible because we cannot compete making clothes because the clothes are very cheap. So you buy a Valentino for €2. At the same time, it's a great interesting. I'm in the board of a contemporary dance school, and it's interesting. The students who got jobs afterwards, one was teaching at a French school, started to take clothes the same way as we do it. It's so cheap to buy T-shirts that he said, I actually don't wash them. I throw them away after one time because it's cheaper to do that than actually take the... So it also stimulates that. There's a very big knowledge that they're dumped, but the people who work in these companies say, I make money out of it, so for me it's good. But I think there's also a very clear idea that it really stops development themselves. I talked to Larry. We talked to, and because it's much worse in Ghana than it is in Tanzania, because I don't know why Ghana is more of a... What there was an interesting thing yesterday, and I think this morning said, there's very little discussion about second-hand clothes in Europe involving the countries where it goes, because it's Tanzania is big, Ghana is much bigger. In Chile, they say, I don't know what the name of the desert is one of the biggest dumps in the world. But in that discussion, I think that's what we talked about, is very often people are not taking into that discussion. But people do see it. At the same time, it is cheap clothes. It's the same why we buy H&M, because it is very easy, because you think, I don't want it, but it is there and it's available.
Okay, with that, thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Matthias to... we'd like to invite Matthias to give a brief announcement.
Do you want the microphone? Yeah, I can take this one. Thanks for your help. So anyway, this is a bonus presentation. It's actually not an announcement. It would be less than an hour. The reason for this is that I don't know if any one of you heard that I had a question to the keynote speaker this morning. I asked him, how does the new regulations in EU come into this speech, because that are actually affecting everything we're all doing, everything we're all doing, the new climate regulations. And obviously that was not his area. He was an excellent scientist, but this is something. And then I spoke to 4 or 5 of you around here, and nobody had any clue about what this was about. So I'm not an expert on this, but I know a bit about it because I've been working with it a couple of years, and this is changing what we're doing. So the European climate law came into action in July 29, 2021. And it states that 55% reduction of greenhouse gases needs to be done 1990 to 2030. Climate neutrality 2050, and then negative emissions. And I will come to a point then. This is a patchwork of different things. I changed. It says EU climate law there instead of EU climate targets, and that's because the picture is a little bit old. And it's too difficult for you to read, so I make this to support you so that you don't try to read that. Instead, I will give you, and those will be the things you need to look up afterwards, because this is, I'm taking your afternoon here. You want to go and listen to the panels. But you should know those things. So we have EU Emissions Trading System 1, which is an informal name, with about the 13,000 of the biggest industries in the EU and air travel within EU, saying that the last emission right to all those, there is a budget, there is a limited number of greenhouse gas emissions that can be emitted by those industries, and the last one will be sold 2039. After that, there is no greenhouse gas emissions. EU ETS 2 is coming into action in 2027, where we add buildings and land transport to this. And the last emission right there will be sold 2043, unless it's sharpened. The CBAM is taking care of the carbon leakage that could happen. So there will be, in practice, it's a carbon tax, but they don't call it that because that would be sensitive. And then there is effort sharing regulation, which takes care of, which states 40% reduction 25 to 2030, and it covers about 60%. So it covers the rest, but actually also the buildings and land transport. All those things are extremely complicated, and I have about 3 minutes to tell them. This is mainly for you to understand that those things are happening right now. There is the land use change and forestry regulation, taking care of the biomass so that we wouldn't solve the others by just burning our forests. And a large social fund in practice with the idea of taking all the funding that comes from all those and trying to reduce the social complications that it will lead to. So, and this is the price, it's an example of the emission trading system. The price from 2014 to 2018 and 2019, when I started to getting interested in this, because the price suddenly rose from 4 or 5 euro to extremely high levels, about 20, 25 euros, and people got really scared. So they said, now this system will break. And then the EU regulators strengthened the price, and it was above 100 early this year, because this regulations has been strengthened. So what I would say, what does this mean? Well, it does mean that EU is going from climate goals to regulations, and that's a big change. That was the question I asked this morning. It's a regulation, it's not a goal. It's happening, and there are very heavy economic mechanisms that means that this needs to happen. And that means that, for instance, I have a favorite statement from our Minister of Finance when she got the question, so what do you think about the Swedish environmental goals? And she said, well, if we don't reach them, we don't reach them. And that is like saying, you can't, well, the point is, you just can't drive on the left side of the road if you decided it's right-hand traffic. So it's regulations, it's not targets to drive on the right-hand side. Sorry, British people. And then, what does this mean? So I brought up, this is I did this before lunch or during lunch. So common criticism that I've heard is that the regulation will not stand the political pressure, that the carbon leakage will be too high, that the policies do not support circularity, and also that the target is not radical enough. And I can't evaluate those risks, but the regulations have passed with strong majorities in those different EU Commission, EU Parliament, and the EU Council. So I would be happy to talk to you if you know about any stronger regulations, because I'm not convinced this is extremely great, but I haven't seen anything as strong, and it is affecting all the things we're doing. And I got so engaged, I even did some artwork on this, so if anyone wants to see the movie Art of Rules, please check on this link.
Thank you very much. If you have questions, you'll be around to talk offline.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matthias, and it's a very nice transition to the last formal time of the main conference. We are now moving on to the panel. Not saying this is finished afterward, because we have the best time of the conference just tonight, because we have the gala. And don't forget that we are also running 4 workshops tomorrow. So it's not yet finished, but for now we are moving on to the panel, whose title is Sustainable Digitalization. When I have chosen this title, is basically meaning exactly what we mean by ICT for sustainability. What I mean by this is that we want to see ICT both as part of the problem, and we need to make it more sustainable, but also part of the solution, and looking at how we can use digitalization for more sustainability. So sustainability going among the environmental, social, and economic pillars. So for today, this is a very short panel with a lot of panelists that I will ask to join me on stage if you want now. And by the time that you're joining me on the stage, I will introduce you. So first of all, we have Pierre-Alain Muller, who is president of the University Haute-Alsace. Gaël Blondel, Chief Membership Officer at the Eclipse Foundation that we heard this morning. Pierre Janin, Councillor for Digital and Innovation at the Rennes City. Birgit, that we all know now, who is Associate Professor at Chalmers University of Technology. Hervé Salou, Managing Director at the Competitiveness Cluster, Image et Réseau. And Eric Calais, Innovation and Industrialization Director at Keolis. I think we can give a big applause to all of them. So before joining them, I will very quickly introduce them more than their actual position. So Pierre-Alain, thank you very much for joining us today. Is president of the university, but he is also professor in computer science, more specifically in software engineering, and a core member of the modeling community, the communities that I'm coming from. For a more personal point of view, he is also one of the reviewers of my PhD, and he took a lot of time during my career, giving a lot of advice. So I'm really, really happy and proud to having you today in the panel. Thank you very much for joining. Gaël Blondel is an open source promoter from the inception, from the beginning, from setting up businesses, working or not, with open source, to business development in different companies, and now running more or less the open source Eclipse Foundation. He is now in the board of directors of the foundation, and he should also make transparent that I should also make transparent that Eclipse is a platinum sponsor of the conference from day one. So they gave a very great support, and probably you all have seen them on the booth of the conference. Pierre Janin, that we already seen during the CTL reception, is a research director at INSERM, is working on neuroimaging and artificial intelligence, even before the rise of artificial intelligence. He has both a PhD and an habilitation in computer science, and is also an elected councillor at the Rennes City for digital and innovation. Birgit, I'm always trying to avoid your last name, I'm super sorry about this. But Birgit is an associate professor in software engineering at Chalmers University. She's mostly coming from the requirement engineering community. She is also very well known for the Karlsruher Manifesto for Sustainability Design for Software. And she coined the term software engineering for sustainability. And she is a key person in the ICT4S scientific community, driving a lot the standing committee of the conference. So thank you very much for joining us. Hervé Saliou, Managing Director at the Competitiveness Cluster Image et Réseau. So what is a Competitiveness Cluster? In France is some organization trying to federate different industrial partners on different activities and application domains. And of course, because Rennes is the hometown of telecommunication in France, this one is mostly about telecommunication and also images. He has been for a long time at Nokia before joining this, and I think we can discuss about this during the panel. Thank you very much for joining. And Eric Calais, Innovation and Industrialization Director at Keolis. I should also make transparent that Keolis is also a sponsor of the conference from almost the beginning that we was looking for sponsoring. So thank you very much for the support. And before joining Keolis, he was for a very long time at GC Deco and Bouygues. And thank you very much for joining us. So I will join you now, and we have chosen the panelists such as we can cover basically both not only the scientific community but also the society and the industry. So I hope they will cover all these different dimensions of society, industry, and science. So we decided to go through different questions that will be asked to all the panelists, giving their opinion on this according to the different hats that they are wearing today. And of course, we will try to keep some time at the end for having some interaction with the audience. So please keep your question, and we'll have some time at the end for asking. For starting the discussion, I would like to ask you a very, very general question. which is about the risk and opportunities about the digitalization, and more specifically with regard to the sustainability. It's a very general question which gives you the way of introducing yourself with hats that you want to wear today during the panel. So we have different mics, and I propose that maybe we start by Pierre-Alain about this. So please let us know for you what are the risks and opportunities of the digitalization.
Thank you for the question. Don't you have simple questions? No. Maybe the risk is that we pass by, we forget about, or we don't really understand the challenges here. So we could just continue doing digitalization, but forget about sustainable. It's very difficult to say sustainable digitalization. And now the opportunities is basically to introduce a new dimension. When we think about algorithm, for instance, we were used to think about space, execution speed, and so now we have to think about energy as well. So that's probably the opportunity, introducing those three dimensions in our way of thinking about digitalization.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Gaël, do you want to take it?
Yeah, maybe more on the opportunity side. So as an open source foundation, I think that from my perspective, the opportunity is that 80% of every software is made of open source. So there is a big opportunity to do stuff in open source that will have an impact everywhere. Because if you improve the energy efficiency of widely used open source frameworks, then all the developers all around the world will, without even knowing it to some extent, and maybe that's a bad thing, but will do better in terms of energy efficiency, for example. So that's where I see part of our role is connecting between this community and the developers, and yeah. So that would be my first point.
Which put a lot of responsibility into the open source foundation.
Sorry. For example, we are doing that now on cybersecurity. Over the years, because open source is more and more used, open source components, even if they are not less secured by essence, but they have become a surface of attack for security. And we are taking the responsibility of improving or upping our game on security and helping our developers upping their game. And I think that's what we do now. And what I can see and what I'm learning here is that in maybe 1 year, 2 years from now, after they are doing better on security, that we help them do better on sustainability and energy efficiency, etc.
Thank you very much, Gaël. Pierre, do you want to give some more on this?
Yes. Maybe what I can say is that the discussion we have now is a discussion that we can have for any technological progress. And I think we are exactly at a point, or I don't know, an inflection point, or in an intersection between two curves. One is a technological progress, the growth of economy and wealth and whatever. And the other way, we have all these, let's say, world issues, challenges, the climate crisis, the social aspect. And we are at the intersection where we really have to consider the value, the benefits, and also the risk and the weaknesses of what we are doing. And so we are at this point, and we have a strong responsibility, an individual one, all together, in trying to draw where we are going now, exactly in this intersection point.
Thank you very much. Birgit?
I agree with Pierre that we have a strong responsibility here. We do have a lot of opportunity here to shape the future. There's a couple of risks associated with that, namely, we got these fancy new toys, we can build so many new cool systems now, and we can digitalize the entire world. And when we give really powerful tools to people who are very enthusiastic, they sometimes do things that they better not be doing with them. We've seen plenty of examples of that in our history and in the art performance right before this talk, this panel. And for the opportunities, we get to get uncomfortable, because in addition to having all these beautiful new toys and humanity always having a craving for newness, we also like safety. And our current state that we're used to is safe. So now we get to rethink, what does that actually mean if we really want to end neocolonialism? What does that really mean that we want equal participation and that we want to see people as of equal value and give everybody equal opportunities? What does that mean in a world where we definitely don't have the natural resources to bring everybody up to the level of where we're spending many resources right now? So what is a rethinking of how we want to live together as community in a way that reminds us, oh, we don't have a relationship with nature, we're part of nature, so we better take care of this whole ecosystem that we are a part of.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Hervé, yeah.
Yes, maybe two examples to illustrate a little bit. Just to start, for example, with AI. If you consider AI, on one hand, you have a threat because you will change the way people are doing things, but on the other side, you create huge opportunities for the industry, for the companies, and you optimize also logistics and a lot of things, and at the end, so you spend, yes, more, let's say, environmental footprint, but on the end, you may have a win. And also here we have a community of people focusing on innovation, and also for sustainability. In fact, we change also the field, the possible field of innovation. I mean, because to get systems which are more sustainable, we need to innovate, and we create another field of innovation. And for example, so we are accompanying, supporting projects, and we try to get, for example, public funding for the projects. And I mean, 2 years ago, the typical question would be, okay, how much employment does this create? And now the question will be, okay, do you understand your carbon footprint? What do you understand the acceptability of your solution? So you see the world is just changing, and it creates, of course, a lot of opportunities.
Thank you very much. And Eric, please.
Yes, of course, saving carbon and energy is very important, but for us as a public transport operator, having ICT is very important, because there are some solutions like the metro in Rennes, like bike sharing, that we can operate since a long time thanks to ICT. And I think what the most important is the purpose of what we do and why we do digitalization for an ICT. If it's for something that is unuseful or a new game, it's something. But if it allows people to get out of their car, for example, or to have more bike than previously, I think it's definitively a good opportunity.
Thank you very much. You will all notice that we mentioned 2 times artificial intelligence, but there was no ChatGPT mentioned right now, up to now, so no. Congratulations. So after this first round of the table, I think one of the points is that we have the responsibility to find the right balance in between digitalization and sustainability, in the context of the sustainability that we want to address. And for this, of course, we need to have some way of measuring. And the measure is a way for us to take some decision. And of course, we need to measure from the different dimension. And maybe I would like to start from the societal dimension. And I'm looking at you, Pierre, because of course, we need to measure the adoption. We need to measure what will be the impact of the introduction of some digitalization into the society. So I don't know, when we are at the city, for example, how are you dealing with these questions, and what are you doing for this?
Let's try to make it short. So first, remember what I say on Monday, the first thing that we have to do is to consider that digitalization is really a political choice. So we address it from this point of view. So my meaning political, that means that it impacts the society in which we all live, and this is I would say, the positive definition of politics. Now it's how you conduct your politics. So this is about the methodology you follow. So we can talk about the methodology, of course, because we are all scientists, and we strongly believe in a rigorous methodology, even in a political decision making. So that means first being able to identify the challenges, the specifications, and I strongly. So I'm going a bit beyond of your question, but I will go to the point. And so first specifications. So I strongly believe that even for IT, we need to be fed by the society, by the citizens, and so we don't own the truth. The truth is a part of everyone here. Then you have to conduct the decision you taken, the actions you want to take. So there are many actions, and you know better than me things that can be done. So it has to be done in a quite industrial process. So this is what we are doing now in the cities. We are building a PMO organization. So probably know which is a project manager officer that we have, and we deal with all the digitalization project in a very industrial manner. The difference is when, and it's a bit what Hervé just said, is when a new digitalization project is coming to our department. So we have a sheet to evaluate the different impacts. So what is the added value, but also what is the ecological impact, social impact, and are the bias taken into account. And so so we have green, orange, red light, and so you go to the next point and you implement, and then you have to evaluate. So evaluating is really part of the process when you do politics, and you have to evaluate the impact of your politics, and you have of course to evaluate it in a very agile way. So not wait the next elected peoples to measure what you did and if you did it well or not. So you have to do it in a quite agile way. It's not easy because it's not the culture of the actual public departments. You can imagine. And so how you evaluate? So the first thing is to evaluate it in a very relative way. So how you progress, which is already a first target, and then try to rely on metrics and methodology which are provided, for example, by national institute, like maybe you talk about that already, the INR, the National Institute of Responsible Digital Technology. And so we have been labeled by this institute, and the label is not only for saying you are great and you are doing good job, it's also to commit to commitments for the next 2 years, 3 years, and we have criterion and we have values that we try to improve. So the delta aspect is important, but still we need measurements. We still need metrics because it's not easy to identify the ecological energy footprint of all our technology, and it's not only about, of course, you know about the energy impact, but it's also about the social. So as you said, everything is combined together. So it's an issue. That's why we need the academy to work on that to help us in trying to better assess. But yeah, we are at the point where we are starting the methodology, but we still need tools for going further.
But do you already have some metrics that you are monitoring, such as you can monitor both the adoption of the digitalization and the impact of the digitalization, but also the collective opinion from the different citizens of the city?
Metrics, I don't know, but tools, yes, we use. So for assessing, for a global assessment, we use the INR reference framework that
Could you give some word on this?
Sorry?
Could you give some word on this, especially for
so it's mainly qualitative, but it's a huge list of points that you have to consider that includes all the responsibilities or the challenges in digitalization, and so not only energy and hardware impact and all that stuff. It's also about social access. It's also about sovereignty, about open source or open data aspect. So we are one of the first city that released our public data in open data in Rennes, and we are still going. So I don't have to tell it now, but we just received this morning that we have a huge project which have been accepted with the local partners that will help us to go a bit further in the idea of open data, which is also a strong challenge. And then we also capture the voices of the citizens. So we build different tools for that. So we have, for example, a long-term council, I can call it that way, which consists of 25 citizens randomly selected, and that study all the challenges around digitalization in the city, so locally. So it's not something worldwide. It's really study it in a very local way. And I think this is very important also to put the digitalization in a local scale, I would say.
Yeah, localities make sense, yeah. And maybe I would like to move on now to Pierre-Alain Muller, because so you're not only president of the university, but you're also professor. You teach a lot during your career, especially in computer science. So what is for you the way of addressing this problem of the sustainability, and how to measure what will be the impact of how we change the curriculum with regard to this question?
So about curricula, the idea currently is that so we have to explain general things to the students basically, and then to in all the different fields to incorporate in those disciplines aspects about sustainability. So I mean, so if I take it from a computer scientist or software engineering, as I said before, now we are discussing about trade-off between energy, speed. So, but that's for computer scientists. So all the different disciplines have to find some way to make it possible for the students to grasp what is the reality of sustainable something. And as I told you earlier today, the major issue I see currently is the human sustainability. So we do operate under some conditions which are not sustainable, but from a human point of view. So helping the planet is something that we have to do, but currently we have to help ourselves. And so that for the education point of view, the question is how do we embed the students in this process? Because they are all aware. Everybody is aware, but the question is how do we practically do something? And so the idea is probably to enroll them in this process. So we are not, you see, it's not really, we do not have to deliver some messages. We have to live together something which is making this whole system sustainable.
Thank you very much. Now moving to industry, maybe I'm looking at you too. Maybe Eric, if you want to jump in. For you, what is your way of measuring what is the impact of what you're doing by introducing some digitalization at Keolis, and how to measure it, and then how to use this measure for the decision support?
One of the key indicator for us is modal shift. How many people are in the train, the metros, and so on? How many on their cars? How many on active mobility? And this is a very important way for us to measure whether we are good or not in our job. What is very interesting in Rennes, I would like to add on what Pierre was saying, is that it's probably the only city in the world where we are co-building the network with citizens. There is La Fabrique Star in Rennes, where more than 700 people had their contribution to how we should reorganize the bus network once the B line was open. And this is a very interesting movement that we do not see in that many places. Australia is good too, but Rennes is very ahead for that. So that's very, very interesting. And I would just also like to add something about inclusivity, because digital is wonderful, but sometimes in public transport we also have to address people that are not able to read. So how do we make them understand where they are and what languages they should be doing? So having the two sides is very interesting to remain a bit down to earth.
Yeah, and that's an important point, that sustainability also covers the inclusiveness of the digitalization that we want to offer, especially for blind people and many diseases that we can have. Yeah, thank you very much for reminding this. Hervé, do you want to jump in on this?
Yes, maybe. So yes, as you mentioned, sustainability is not only the carbon footprint; is a lot of things, and it's always quite difficult to make it objective. I can give you an example with 5G, for example. 5G was a great example because on one hand, you have great engineers thinking about the radio waves to get the algorithm which are really efficient so that you can be 10 times more efficient than the generation before. And also with the antennas, which are, for example, shutting down when there is just no traffic, etc. So a lot of things. And at the end, you have the citizens. Do we need really 5G? What is the need? And you see, you are in the middle, and you have to manage and understand this kind of thing, because on one hand you have the technology, but even you measure the technology, okay, you will say, okay, you have a great improvement, you can carry 10 times more data for the same price, okay, so it's great. But on the other hand, people will say, okay, but don't forget the bouncing effect or rebound effect. You will create a kind of whole, you will get much more data shared, and at the end, it's a loss. So it's difficult to do this. So when we have projects to assess, so we have these assessments since quite a long time, but what we are trying to do, and we have working groups starting to think about that, is how to make it more objective, and also because and this is something which is also shared by the investors when they want to, or they would like to get some indicators that are really relevant to say, okay, we will finance this one because this or this. It's not an easy question.
And maybe I will benefit from this topic of the 5G to come back to you, Pierre, because I think that's one of the topics that you addressed when you arrived at the city, right? So what did you do with regard to this, and how did you measure what will be the impact of this, and how did you collect the collective opinion from the citizens in Rennes?
I can just start by a short story. So you understood from Benoit's introduction, I'm not a professional politician, so I'm a researcher, and so I was elected only 3 years ago, and the first meeting I had with the mayor of the city, I knew that there was the 5G equation on my list of topics I had to do, and in my mind I was thinking, okay, I will take 2 years, I will meet everyone, and I will really take my time. And the first meeting after my election with my colleagues, of course, then the mayor turned to me and said, Pierre, you have to start the file about 5G, and we would like to have an answer on a few months. And so, okay, how I will deal with that? So I decided to rely on the citizen involvement, and so again I selected 20 people, 20 citizens randomly, and they started. Of course, we invited a lot of experts. Hugues Ferber was invited, Gauthier Roussil also. I saw them this week, and we invited local and national experts to give their point of view from both sides. So we were not afraid about strong anti-technology or strong pro-technology. We needed all the different viewpoints. And so after 4 months of discussion with experts, with about 12 experts, the citizen came back with a report, which is a quite long report, easy to read, so it's available online if you want to have a look on it. So the name of our work was Mission 5G, so that was fun. And then the citizen emitted 54 recommendations, actions that can be done by the city. So what was interesting when we started with the question of 5G, the first experts we invited said there is no way to change anything about 5G because it is decided nationally in Paris, and so you just have to say yes, and so no discussion. So it was the first meeting with the citizens. We were a bit afraid about that, and it's a bit the same with digitalization. So with the IT organization nowadays, it seems to be in the cloud meaning on the sky. Coming from abroad, mainly US and China. This is what we have in mind. Huh? But so we have to put the IT technology more locally and work in a different way. So when we started, when the citizens started to study 5G technology, they really started to feel that progressively there is a marge de manœuvre, I mean space of decision, space of action that you need to take. And for example, one main concern regarding 5G technology from the society was the wave emission of the antennas. That was the main question at the beginning. And so when you start addressing this point, so there are many things you can do. First, pedagogical things, saying that the main emission is coming from your own phone. And of course, the emission is really proportional to the data requested. This is what Hervé said. And also, so what we did from the cities, we put sensors all along the city to measure the exposure in volt per meter. And so we have a real-time measurement of the emission of waves in the city, and we are also doing measurements every year in all schools and elementary and primary schools, and about 100 measurements we do every year to not to have the value by itself, but to see the increasing of the value. So these are things we can do locally. Well, these are two examples. I have tons of examples, but.
Thank you very much, and we'll probably come back about what we can do locally and more at the national or even international level afterward. Thank you very much for this. Maybe we can ask Gaël about, because Gaël, you're representative of many technology as representative at the Eclipse Foundation, so many technologies that are probably not all sustainable, both because some of them are probably using a lot of energy and taking a lot of energy for being operated, and also because there is certainly some technologies that are not making more sustainable our world. Is that the kind of question that we have at the Eclipse Foundation? Is that the kind of things that you try to measure at the Eclipse Foundation? And if it's not already done, is it something in your roadmap in the future?
I don't think we are not measuring that for the moment. I think we should certainly start measuring that, and we should address this topic. I think that there are also some aspects even in the way people develop open source that are potentially not so efficient. Like every time you have a commit or a pull request, or then starting lots of tests, etc., is certainly something we need to address in the future. We are not there yet. I think one aspect maybe is that, and I have an example on that, is that even if we are not fully sustainable in the practices that open source developers use, we help make some pieces of software sustainable. And I think that I was talking at one of the coffee breaks to somebody who was telling me that in their measurement, the carbon footprint was higher in the development phase, just because of how many developers you need, etc., rather than in the usage phase. And so, to some extent, when you have an open source project that lasts for 10 years, and over 10 years you are able to evolve it, that can be interesting. And we already have that, and we have some very famous projects that have been doing that, and where the initial company, for example, lost interest and started to do something else, and instead of letting the project die, we managed to onboard a new team of people interested in sustaining the development of this project. So I think that this is by itself an interesting win and an interesting role we can carry forward. Another aspect is that we were talking about measurement. I think that at some point you may be interested in having software to measure, but also in having databases. And well, I was talking with David from Boa Vista, and the idea that you need to have open data for the data so that people can talk about it. So that's also some not strictly open source, but having open source software for the measurement so that you can audit that it's not cheating, and having open data sets is also something that is very important in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Gael. Birgit, still on this question of the measurement, we are doing a lot of research in computer science, using a lot of energy, and I mean, we are not yet at the point that we are not really measuring what will be the impact of what we are doing. Do you have any insight on this, and what do you think on that topic?
I think we've been talking a lot about how to measure. That was the big question that we started with, and I think the first question that we need to answer is what to measure. And yes, one part is energy, and we've heard that from several of you. Well, we also need to measure the social participation, because what is it that in the end we really want to increase? What's the objective? Why are we doing all of this? And Pierre-Alain mentioned that a lot of our students already have really good insights into this, and some of the students do, some of the students don't. So sometimes I ask myself, how much do we need to bring into education? How much do we need to listen better? Or how much do we get to listen better? Because they are all still curious and full of ideas, when sometimes we have run out of curiosity because we've been so well trained in making things efficient. Because as soon as we know what we measure, we're very good at making that more efficient and at optimizing for that metric. So I love to hear that in Rennes we have a bunch of examples of how you include the citizens and how you bring them all to the table and get data from them, and how industry is also including local data and making sure that that means something. So what we want to measure, in addition to hopefully coming to a positive environmental footprint instead of mitigating our negative environmental footprints and handprints, we also hopefully want to measure or increase as an objective social participation, agency. We want to empower the individual. We want to increase equity locally and internationally, and I think that is one of the big challenges. I can optimize with my local community. We can build trust relationships here. What does that mean on a larger level? What does that mean on a global level? And we have a lot of international conversations in research, and can we have communities of practice that exchange more about the what that is that we want to go towards, and then we can figure out the how to measure it. And one last big piece of that is, like I said, we humans, we love everything new and shiny. And we're also really good at distracting ourselves when there's stuff going on that we don't like so much. I'm like, oh, Netflix and chill, or go shopping, or this or that. So there is a lot that technology kind of fixes for us, like a Band-Aid, when we don't want to deal with what's going on inside. And that is obviously me putting on my yoga teacher hat right now, because I've read a lot of the philosophy behind that. We all are very prone of distracting ourselves with the new shiny things. And maybe that is a piece that we can introduce into education way earlier. So when I think about how do I measure myself at the end of the day, then I check on how much did I live into my attentions, how well are my actions aligned with what I want to contribute to the world. Sometimes that's difficult to measure, and sometimes that's very easy.
Thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for the reminder about the yoga, because we have a yoga session just afterwards, so we should not be too much in late after. Just moving on the next question, the measurement is also related to then some decision support, and decision support can lead to regulation. Right now, there is a lot of freedom in the digitalization, and we are super happy about this. We talk about the neutrality of the net. We talk about open source with very few regulation behind this. And the question is, should we need to go to more regulation into IT with regard to sustainability or not? And maybe, of course, I'm looking at you, Pierre, as a first. We was talking about the localities versus what we can do at the national level. Do you think that regulation is something needed or something that we should avoid? And what will be the adoption from the general public?
It's a difficult question, but I will have two parts of two answers. One, if let's try to consider the digital world. So it's let's say a virtual world. We have now a physical world which is very well regulated. So when we take our car, whatever we do, we have taxes. So it's regulated. It's okay, so we can live with that. And so we use belt when we drive. We don't drink too much or not at all, and we are okay with this regulation. And so when you see now the virtual world, which is coming, there is almost no regulation yet. We are just at the very beginning, and so definitely it does not make sense to have two worlds. I mean, which are the virtual one, which is coming, is already quite powerful. There are many things you can do in it, and not only playing, gaming, but also communicating with people, buying, and probably more you will be able to do. So I don't know if it will happen, but if we go into that direction, and definitely we will need regulation in this virtual world. Definitely, there is no way. Now, how you regulate, who is regulating, who is the trust party that do regulation. It's really, again, a political question. So I, of course, obviously strongly believe in public services and public responsibility. Hopefully, education is regulated. It's a public service, at least in France. And we are quite happy about that. Of course, it could be better, and there are many things like that which are strong values of our life that we want to. So in France, we really consider the state, the government, and the elected peoples are trusted people. So we can trust them. It's not always the same. It's cultural. It's historical. But definitely in France, I think we need to consider digitalization as also as part of a public services, and from the educational point of view, from the usage point of view. And so yes, we need definitely some regulations here.
But is that something really that we can do at the city or at the national level, or because digitalization is worldwide? So what is the position with regard to this? I mean, is that something that we really can do at the national level?
Local we can, national we can also. I mean, it can be done. It's a choice. It's again the same equilibrium or that we need between a pure economical driven direction and something which take in consideration a bit more the challenges that we faced now, again, social and ecological. And so definitely we need European regulations, we need national regulations, and we need local regulations. And if things are not going or quick enough or fast enough from the national and the Europe point of view, we will do it locally. That's why I'm here, I would say.
Thank you very much. Hervé, you want to jump in?
Yes, I would like to react a little bit because, yes, on one hand, you can say, okay, you have the market regulates itself. On the other hand, you have a strong regulation, and that's true in all countries. I mean, the state, the city are, let's say, kind of trusted partners. But you can also imagine a world where regulation is everywhere, and I mean, the state knows what you are doing on your computer. You have video controls in the streets. You know exactly what people are doing. I mean, it's not what I want. But if I look at the UE law about RGPD, I think it's a good thing. So yes, we need regulation, but we need also to be very careful about which kind of regulation we do want to have. And there is also, I think, something that will come even more and more is the pressure of the society, of public opinion, because people understands that IT and their usage of IT has impact. But for example, let's take an example, virtual reality, metaverse, or let's say mixed reality, virtual reality. We know it needs some energy, right? If you use such application to people re-education after an accident so that they can get, let's say, back to the normal, let's say, state, I mean, you will say, okay, now it is only for pure gaming. Maybe people will start to say, okay, is it really reasonable? So also it means that we can imagine that in the future, I don't know if it is in months or years, but maybe you will have also some pressure because people will take conscious of the impact, and so some usage will be, let's say, okay, but some usage will not be okay because of this. And so, because regulation means also less freedom, so it's a balance, and it's a tricky thing, I think.
Gael, please go ahead.
Yeah. Just on regulating software, I don't know about regulating software and making it more sustainable, but this year we can see that since GDPR, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Since GDPR, thank you. There is this mindset at the European level that we did GDPR, and it is a good thing. It is leading by regulation, more or less, because you can see that California is adopting something similar in China, in several states in the US, etc. And we can see under the leadership of Breton that there are lots of new regulations being prepared for technology, for digital technologies at the European level. And some of them are certainly useful, interesting, and some of them are sometimes a bit naive in the way, and you can see that they have been written by lawyers that have no clue about software, and that's a problem. And I think that there will likely be regulations for software, and that will cover the topic of sustainability, etc. Because the previous presentation, we see that this is already a topic that is being regulated at the European level, and with this mindset of leading by regulation, because we to some extent in Europe we come to the conclusion that we have not been very successful in leading by technology recently. So reproducing the example of GDPR and leading by regulation, we may end up with regulations that will be, to some extent, completely meaningless and counterproductive, because we have not managed yet to educate our policymakers about what is software, and how it can be different to regulate some software from regulating physical goods. I mean, when you have something like a car, then you have safety regulations about the car, the belt, etc. That's easy. That's more complex to regulate software and digital technologies because of their, to some extent, liquid nature.
Birgit, please, yeah. What do you think about this, especially in science? Should we also regulate? I mean, there is some regulation, for example, in other fields like medicine and so on. We cannot do research as we want. And do you think that we should also introduce some regulation in science for ICT?
We actually do have quite a few. I was going to quickly respond or add on to what Gael mentioned about the software regulations. So in Göteborg, we work quite a bit with automotive software in our research, and the way how we need to write safety assurance cases there to make sure that the car that now includes so much software can still fulfill the safety conditions, that's going to be amplified so much if that new software regulation by the European Union comes through. I've looked at the draft last year. It's going to be extensive documentation for any of these cases, and I don't know how anybody would get through those stacks of paper. For research specifically, we've come across more and more cases where the ethical considerations need to go through a regional or a national board. In Sweden, it's actually a national board, which means that any research study where I ask a human something that could potentially concern their well-being for my particular research, because that's what I'm really interested in, it is health-related data. So thanks to GDPR, for that reason only, I already need to go through the ethics review. And then, of course, there are other ethical concerns that should be checked. And that applies also when we think we're doing something good. One example, there was a study of people coming to a nursing home and telling elderly people stories once a week. And after the end of the study, after 3 months, the researchers stopped coming to the nursing home to tell stories. So the well-being of the elderly people had significantly increased during the time when they had that additional social interaction. And after the intervention ended, it actually declined to a lower level than it was before for some time. And that, to me, was an example of great intentions, social benefit, could also be thought of with the help of technology. And then at some point, the researchers didn't think far enough of what long-term potential consequences could be, because as humans, we're not so great at thinking about long-term consequences of our actions. And I think that is where the regulations could significantly help as a framework to support us in thinking of long-term consequences.
Thank you very much. So, to keep time for discussing with the audience, I will probably move on to the last question, questions that I really like to ask to all of you. And this written as this, as president, we have one president, but think about the president of a country, for example, willing to engage in ICT and sustainability. What would be the reforms that you want to push for? Please, Pierre-Alain.
Okay. I think I would take some time to make sure that we do not build that we do not raise communities against other communities. And so having some people that would be good and some people that would be less good, and so that's something that would be I would be very taking a lot of time making sure that there is an acceptability in the society. I would like to emphasize, we are all addict to energy. Okay? And for instance, I can generate about 200 watts if I'm driving a bike, 200 for 1 hour or something like this. If I go to the gas station and I buy 1 liter diesel, I've got 10 kilowatts. And I can easily buy about 200 slaves. So, and this energy is behind all the things we are talking here. We are used to energy. We are used to digital energy, if you want. And what happens now if I start to say to the people as a president, you are used to energy, but now it's over. And that's very strange. So the question is, do we have to stop to use this energy, or do we find some other ways to generate energy? And this morning, Jean Jouzel was talking a lot about decarbonation in the end. So we should maybe not mix decarbonation and stopping to use energy. At least this is a question.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to this during the question. Please, Gael.
Yeah, well, maybe to come back to my previous remark, I think teaching software development to all policymakers would be maybe not too much, but that they have written a program in their life. I think that could be helpful.
Thank you very much. So we are lucky enough for having one that has been very well trained on computer science. So please, Pierre, what would be your reform?
You have written a program. Yeah. Okay, so you're good. Yeah, definitely a lot of it. Maybe my first decision would be to change the democratic process. So, and so by giving more decision power to citizens and direct ones, because I think the representative democracy that we have nowadays is not. So I'm here for talking about politics. So I use the opportunity.
Please go ahead. Take this opportunity.
Yeah, the representative democracy that we have now is not the right solution. I think it's the end of it, and so we have to reinvent, and especially for ICT, we have to reinvent another model, where definitely this is one French colleague of Hugues Verboeuf who were saying that today the digitalization is coming from the top. So we have no ways of controlling it. So now it has to come from the bottom, and so from ourselves. So we have to choose the digitalization we want, and in a more global way, we have to choose the city and the society we want for tomorrow. What is the best way to choose it is not just to vote every 6 years, which we see does not make so much sense, especially if we look to some countries just across the ocean. And so maybe something more democratic, a more democratic process with regular participation, involvement of the citizen. We'll have two impacts. So because people will be more responsible of their own society, more involved, and it will have also a strong educational effect. So that will be my first. So please vote for me.
I will definitely vote for you.
Please, Birgit.
By inspiration of Pierre Alain, I will introduce an energy-free day per week, where people get to figure out what else to do with their life, and maybe remember what beautiful other options there are. And I would incentivize as many people as possible starting to grow some of their own food. Even in my studio apartment in Göteborg, I can have a couple of tomato plants. I hope they're still alive when I come back. A neighbor promised to water them, and to simply watch food growing and to be a little more engaged with that. And I also remember a study that I believe came out of Belgium during the pandemic, where in a city, everybody who wanted was given 3 little chiclets, and within a month they had reduced their household waste by I don't remember how many tons, because it was a better use of all the food scraps to give them to the chickens as opposed to throwing them in the waste. Yes, of course, there should also be compost piles. I agree. So there goes my evolution. We're going to have one energy-free day per week. We're going to learn how to regrow our own food, and we're going to re-engage with nature more and take some time to reflect what we really want to do with our life. Vote for me too.
Birgit, President. Please, Harvey.
Okay, you want to have one measure? I'll give you 3. Starting to do politics. Now, the first one is maybe a bit of education, in the sense that we need also to educate people. For example, I'll give you an example. In the telecom industry, most of the energy will be on the devices. So the only fact to keep your device not for 2 years but 4 years, you have a huge impact. Much more than reducing the number of videos that you look at on your screen, right? So a bit of education. The second thing would be more on the industry, because when I see also sorry, you cannot run this app because your hardware is too old. It's really something that, okay. So these things also I think should be a priority because, of course, there are ways to do better. And what is the third thing? I had the third thing in mind, but I don't remember exactly what it was. Yes, it is on cybersecurity, because we have a lot of objects now which are connected with a very poor level of security, and I think it can be an issue, especially when we start to have some autonomous behaviors with AIs, etc. I think a little bit of regulation on cyber can be useful to protect us in the future.
Thank you very much. And Eric, if you want to give your reform.
That's not easy. But I think one interesting thing to be when you are a president is to consider you might be a mayor. I think what you can do at the level of one city, big or smaller, is very interesting because it's very practical. You can have a direct impact on what is happening and so on. And probably it's a very interesting example when you have to run a country, because when you have a country, you are a bit farther, I think, from everyone. So I think it would be my, I don't know whether it's a proposal, but idea.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the last part of this panel, and maybe giving the mic to the students. So we have one here, and yeah, perfect. And you can take this one. So who has some questions for our panelists, starting the discussion with them? Yep, there is someone here, just there. So please maybe give your name, your question, and maybe if it's for one of the panelists, which one?
Okay, Baptiste, I'm from Grenoble in France. I'm sorry if it's a little out of place, but at one moment some of you talk about the inclusivity of technology. And so it made me think about the digital divide, and that sometimes maybe the more inclusive technology is no technology at all, like paying someone to talk to people. So I was wondering, what is your opinion about that? It might be a standard maybe to sustainability also.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Just 2 words. When I started, after being elected, they asked me to write a roadmap as a responsible of digitalization in Rennes, IT technology. And the first point I wrote was de-digitalization. So coming back, being able sometimes to say, no, we don't need IT here. It's better to have it physical contact or whatever. And so, yeah, definitely, we have to also ourselves, being people working in IT, in ICT, we have also to consider that there may be low-cost technology or no IT at all. And definitely, this is important for inclusivity. You know, probably the poll that came out very recently. There is a poll every year in France regarding how do you feel with digital technology. So 3 years ago, we had in mind this 15% of people being out of IT technology. 2 years ago was about, last year was about 30, and now it's 54 people who sometimes don't feel, French people who don't feel comfortable with IT technology when using it. So it's not, the exclusion is not a detail, it's not only for disabled people. No? For the majority of us, there is a different reason for being excluded or having difficulties with IT technology. And it's a strong challenge, a strong issue that we should have in mind. So definitely for administrative process digitalization, it's a catastrophe. I mean,
maybe one thing to be added is there was also the question with IT system with very smart user experience. Sometimes that there is some afterthought from people that develop them. And maybe it's not only the machine and intelligent thing, it's also a way to put you in some attention gap or thing like that. And this is something that real life is not doing. A book is never appealing you to. No, it doesn't. It has happened, but with no technology, it's easier to focus on what you have to do, as you were saying, Brigitte.
Thank you very much. Is there any? Yeah, there is another question just behind, and yeah, please go ahead, and then this one, please.
You didn't speak about low tech. So have you heard about that? How do you define it, if you have heard about that? And how do you see the place of low tech in the ICT in the future?
Maybe I can take that one. I would start with low tech as using what we already have here, using the least additional parts requiring solution, because as humans we're really good at adding complexity. We fix everything by adding another process, another component, another device, another person. We're not so great at simplifying. So thinking, what is the simplest thing that we could possibly do to answer the challenge that was brought to our attention right now is the way to go there, maybe here. Low tech for me also sometimes doesn't even involve digital devices at all. It could be going back to an analog solution if that does the job, because one less thing to break.
Just one remark. We have 24 fab labs here in Rennes, in the city, that really have this mission, is to really help people learn about technology by using low tech and doing things, doing objects. So it's the best way probably to learn the technology, different type, and probably from the low tech aspect, as going to the fab lab. So probably you know this concept. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can go to one of the last questions, so please.
Okay, I'm Aina from INRIA at Grenoble. I wanted to react. One of you said, I think, mixed surveillance and regulation. I wanted to note that we are kind of already under surveillance, but by the big techs, I think, and thanks to regulation, so the GDPR, we are aware of that. So in this sense, regulation can, I think, reduce the surveillance. So yes, I agree that there may still be some lags in this regulation or something bad written, and there we raised the question several times during the preceding days. Should researcher, quickly said, do politics? Is there, so do we have our answer here? At least for the regulation, can researcher help in doing the regulation? So I'm not only speaking about us as computer scientists, but also the social scientists, and so yeah.
Since I heard the question of, is it okay if researchers are activists? I'm going to start with that part. As researchers, as scientists, we claim and we aim for objective studies. We also know that we cannot be objective as persons. So the better I explicitly mention my subjectivity bias in anything that I do in research, the better for everybody else. If I pretend I'm objective, I'm just going blindfolded, or I'm trying to blind everybody else. So if I can say, I'm taking a strong stance for this, and my research that I measured according to this very clean method says this, then I think that's okay. I know there are other opinions out there, and I honor that as well. That's my personal stance. And in terms of the regulations, what we give out to social media, and that is mostly voluntary if an individual person does that. Me living in Sweden right now, I often feel fairly naked because there is a lot of public information available on the internet. People can look up where I live, what my phone number is. It concerned me moving there from California, where things are quite opposite. And it's of course a matter of being used to it. So the question is, how much of that is helpful and how much harm can be done with that, and what's a good middle way to go? I'm not sure I covered all aspects of your question. It was a very eloquently phrased question that had many parts.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Some of you want to jump in, or Pierre, do you want to say something more?
Maybe you want to react?
Pierre, please.
I'm just getting back to the low tech. When I was a kid, some people told me, well, there are two things, you know. There is the high tech. High tech is fun. And then they told me the low tech, there you make money. And so there was a difference at that time. And now this shifted to low usage of technology. And actually, I don't know when this happened. And then you have the deep tech, because you could also have been talking about deep tech, and that would bring us back to maybe unuseful deep tech like ChatGPT was what.
Thank you very much. I think we reached a point that we should stop here the panel, especially because we are running out of time. I think we can really thank our panelists. Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you also to all of you for staying, even if we are running out of time. I'm pretty sure it's super warm into the room. Thank you very much. We are meeting at 8 or possibly a bit before 8 if you don't want to be bothered with the cycling race downtown at the Gala place. Thank you very much for joining this panel, and see you in a bit at the Gala. Yeah, do you want to say something about the yoga?